PodcastCoug Season 4, Episode 2.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PodcastCoug. I am James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the PodcastCoug, where we are all things Cougar football. 30 minutes of Coug talk. We're talking about about Anthony Gordon, our season opener last weekend against New Mexico State, and our upcoming game against the Northern Colorado of the Big Sky. We're also going to talk about a few of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country. So here we go. We keep rolling along. We're reloading. Of course, this season, last season, we were 11-2. We're just picking up where we left off, and really, instead, we don't have any mustaches to wear. Right, we're off to an explosive, electrifying start in uncharted waters, and we just keep winning and winning. Of course, this week's polls, USA Today's coaches poll, number 21 and number 22 in the AP poll, and Anthony Gordon named Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week, and we got a new poll out, actually not a new award this week, Offensive Lineman of the Week, William Ryan. So we got two players of the week this week. Congratulations to Gordon and to William Ryan. So Washington State is off to an explosive start with our 58-7 debut in Martin over New Mexico State. The Aggies, right? It wasn't the best test. It really wasn't the best test for anyone trying to get a gauge on this year's Cougs, really, if you think about it, specifically on defense, right? 58-7 blowout, boat race over New Mexico State. But it's a good starting point. It gives the Cougs a chance to look at a few of our young players buried in the depth, and some, they got some extended playing time in the game, which really, really is good. We're going to talk about that, how it builds confidence, right? So looking back at Saturday's game in Pullman, we examined the extended first career start of Anthony Gordon, focus on the Cougs' effort in the red zone, and then, both on offense and defense, and explain this year's air raid that is really more explosive than it really has been in the past. Really interesting. This is going to be just a fun, crazy year. We thought last year was amazing. Wait for this year. Here we are. Obviously, week 2. Speaking about last week, Gordon was 29 of 35, 420 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4 receivers. Decent? No, quite exceptional, right? First quarter, Gordy was 15 of 15, just perfect. Very accurate, quick release and real precise. Communicated well in the huddle with the team behind, remember Gardner had that great leadership ability, great communication, and Gordon just steps in and takes off, right? His parents are at the stadium. How fun is that? And it wasn't the kind of first game stuff that where somebody's afraid to make mistakes. Gordy lit it up in the end zone in a hurry. I mean, very explosive, very accurate, very fast. He just came out of the gate, just lit it up. In the past, we've seen some of Mike Leach's teams the last 8 years or so. We've had some really slow starts where we're just trying to get going and figuring things out and warming up. Not at all from last Saturday against the Aggies. Just right out of the gate, explosive. 15 out of 15, just absolutely accurate, quick, amazing, just incredibly explosive. So the Cougs produced either a touchdown or a field goal on their first 10 possessions, put up points on the board on each of the 8 drives that Gordon was quarterbacking, right? So Washington State, we're entering week 2 here, is the country's most efficient offense. The Cougs' efficiency rating was just about 99% above where it's important to the quality of opponents, really. And we're not the only Power 5 team opening the season on a low-level mid-major or FCS school. So, we're not the only one with these cupcakes, right? But, and no disrespect, it's just a different, right? It's just different, right? We're just playing, and And we don't have a preseason because these games do count, but it is preseason, right? And it's great. Think of it. People think, this is great for experience to get ready for our conference play coming up, even with Houston, and we're going to talk about that later on at the end of the podcast, Coug. So Gordon achieved perfection in the red zone. He was 3 of 3. Total Washington State went 5 of 5 in the red zone, scoring later on Gage Gubrud's 9-yard pass to Richard Bell back in the end zone, and on Blake Mazza's 34-yard field goal early in the fourth quarter. How about Blake Mazza? So, hey, on defense, the Cougs allowed the Aggies just 2 trips into the end zone and allowed just 7 points. Washington State didn't allow New Mexico State past the 50-yard line on 8 separate drives. It was absolutely great experience, great confidence. So here we are. Hey, really great for Washington State as a whole, right? Anytime you come away with a W, you're going to take it, right? You just can't underestimate Anthony Gordon with his hot start. He was 22 of 23, hitting the first 15 in the first half. He was sharp. He was in command. This is the Leach quarterback of our season. Fifth-year kid, waited 3 years patiently for this, didn't give up, didn't throw in the towel, regardless of who we're playing. No discredit to New Mexico State. They are not going to be the best opponent we face this year, but regardless of who the 11 players that are lining up, you saw the command of the offense. That is everything. If you can line up and know where you want to go on the ball, it's huge, right? Huge step in the right direction. It shows confidence, it shows leadership, and it shows that regardless of who the individual players are going to be, because they're going to get better. The same coverages and the same zones, the same reads, they're just going to be there. And if you know where you're going before the ball, that's amazing. You got to know your stuff, and these games are important and they're great. So it'd be nice to play Auburn, right? But here we are, and it's setting us up for a great conference schedule. So I do want to point out that the offensive line, very communicative, pass on everything. There was a lot of time back there, and you saw those deep throws, and Gordon was just counting the steps. So it was exceptional start, really offensively for the Cougs. So how bad is New Mexico State, or are we just much better? Well, New Mexico State is not great, but better than Portland State, a team that beat Washington State in Pullman about 5 years ago. And I'll say there's a credit to the staff and the kids for getting ready to go with a great solid start right out of the gate. The depth of our roster is really good. Obviously, young receivers like Rod Fisher. So you saw things that make Washington State look better than the past. But New Mexico State wasn't great. But their quarterback and their running back they're good athletes. They've got some good guys, right? Especially their running back, and they puts pressure on the Cougs. They put pressure on the Cougs, and we handled it really well. So there's people that would say, wait a second, their first possession, New Mexico State marches down, they get deep into Coug territory, miss a field goal, then they go score on their second possession. So 2 possessions in the plus side of the field results in 7 points. And it could have been 10 or even 14. And everyone's going, what happened? No Jalen Thompson, no Peyton Pallure, no Logan Tago, and all of a sudden you're going to say, okay, where we go, what happened? Did the defense just need to get their feet wet? Because after that, it was nothing, right? To me, it was a lot of first day blunders where you didn't see it on the offensive side of the ball. No turnovers, no early penalties. You did see some of those early first day kind of jitters coming off the defensive side, right? The major mistakes, no major mistakes. They did some bend, don't break, of course. The missed field goal, and New Mexico State fumbled on the 1-yard line. So you start to tack those up, and especially if they were the Pac-12 teams, we're in good shape. Regardless, regarding the offense, again, 9 receivers caught a football in the game, right? Anthony Gordon's story is great, waiting 3 years everything we've come to expect and more. And how about Roderick Fisher, right? Rod Fisher. He ran track in spring last spring at Washington State. We've got tons of talent, just loaded. Of course, we make the best of the receiving courts. We've got the best, I think, of receiving courts in the Pac-12. So how about Blake Mazza, right? The story is Blake Mazza. 3 for 3, 45, 50, and 34. I can remember this team, we had struggles a few years ago, and it was a big deal. Doesn't matter who you're playing, there's no way to stimulate these live reps, right? Or simulate, I should say. And if you look at the preseason games, that's exactly what they're meant to do. You look at a guy like Mazza who says, hey, let's get him confident. And let him roll, right? That 50-yarder felt good, looks good. Hey, but we have a kicker that has confidence, and we need that from Blake, and our coach needs to be confident in our kicker. So let's go for it. We know that Leach loves to go for it on fourth and whatever, but let's get the 3 points where we need to, and it's going to be a major. This is going to be important down the road in conference play where we need the 3 points. So we've got Mazza in place. He was just perfect. And don't forget, someday we are going to need that PAT away from a major game like a Rose Bowl, right, to get into the Rose Bowl. So don't think that the kicking game is vital, that it's, wow, these confident building points are huge for the confidence in Mazza and the team in the future. So huge takeaway. If a coach can go in there and like Leach says, go for it. No question. It's confidence. It's the confidence factor. Even though Leach is the riverboat gambler and goes for it on fourth down. So we need that. And great Brian Mazza and the confidence with those 3 kicks on those field goals. Now, let's talk about the country's top 10 quarterbacks, the debuts they had last week. These are, the top 10 in the country real quick on their debuts. And, we're spotting, this is week 1, as expected. Jalen Hurts thrived in his debut at Oklahoma, right? So, Jalen Hurts had record-setting and it was flawless in his debut at Oklahoma over Houston. He transferred from Alabama. He threw for 332 yards, 3 touchdowns, and added 176 yards and 3 scores on the ground. And these are the top 10. Now, number 2, there's a Boise State quarterback. His name's Hank Bachmeier. Right, Bachmeier faced a relentless Florida State pass rush, but wasn't fazed by their defense. And so true freshman directed a second-half comeback versus the Seminoles. He threw about 407 yards and a touchdown and over 30 completions. Third on the list is Spencer Sanders of Oklahoma State. Fourth is Justin Fields from Ohio State, or the Ohio State. Sam Howell of North Carolina at number 5. Bo Nix of Auburn. How about that Auburn game against the Ducks? A true freshman. Just an absolute phenom. Bo Nix, Auburn, true freshman, came up in the clutch, delivering timely to beat the Ducks, to direct Auburn in their last-second win over Oregon. Nix finished 42 rushing yards, connected 13 of 31 passes, 177 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Number 7 at Montlake is Jacob Eason. Eason showed his arm strength on a 50-yard bomb receiver, and to receiver Andre, is it Bachelia? Yeah, right. At first quarter, and finished Washington with a debut of 349 yards, 4 touchdowns, 27 completions. Here we are at number 8, Anthony Gordon. Washington State, number 8 in the country. This is ranked, by the top 10 quarterbacks in the country on their debut. Gordon was brilliant, like we talked about in his first extended opportunity of playing time, right? Just absolutely brilliant. Completing his first 15 passes. Gordon ended up the night with 420 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 29 completions. Number 9 is Tommy Stevens, Mississippi State. 10 finishes off at Kelly Bryant at Missouri. So that kind of is a synopsis. We're not going to be talking any sort of Heisman stuff, but it is possible to joke about it. We can joke all we want, laugh about, we haven't, come on, we're at week 2, right? We're not talking Heisman, but the conversation, the top 10 is in there. Gordon keeps playing like he's doing, lighting him up, being accurate, quick, precise. Man, we've got a great season ahead of us. Speaking about ahead, we're going to be right back and talk about our upcoming game against the Bears of Northern Colorado, UNC. From the Big Sky, the Northern Colorado Bears, next, right here on the Podcast Coug.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the PodcastCoug Radio Network. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at PodcastCoug.com.
Welcome back to the second half of the Podcast Coug. I am James Laurie, the Podcast Coug, where we are all things Cougar football, all things Coug football, and Northern Colorado rolls into Martin tomorrow. We're getting a late podcast this week. It's been a crazy week, crazy schedule on my end, but taking off today to Pullman, it's going to be so fun. UNC, what can we get out of the game from a team that lost 35-18 at San Jose State? Their quarterback threw the ball about 40 times for 177 yards. Again, you look at a lot what happened last week, and we are very confident and comfortable in saying that, hey, that was a great week 1, right? We got the tune-up. Everybody is great. Things are rosy. This is another one of those opponents that you want to come in, on Monday and say, yep, 58-7, and that's exactly the plan. But we can't overlook anything with a young team, a young season. Things can happen, as you can see. Say a lot of great stuff has been accomplished. We're confident, and everything is rosy. And again, you want to go 58 or whatever, but we can't overlook anything, because we don't want to be one of those teams to show up on Saturday and one of those teams that gets or doesn't show up on Saturday and then gets highlighted on SportsCenter and says, hey, look what happened, right? But what you can get out of this is Anthony Gordon. You come out fighting hot. Second half, you cooled a little bit last week. Is that going to be your rhythm? I love coming out firing. That's been a problem of ours in the past with the Cougs. We got off to a slow start, an early slow start. Not last week. Can we maintain that? Is that going to be your demeanor? Right? Is that who you are? What football does is allow you an opportunity. Last week was an opportunity. This week it's an opportunity to show exactly what your process and your system is going to look like. We don't want one peak performance we want consistency to stay, literally throughout the entire season. Consistent. Offensive line, running backs, the whole list. This week gives you an opportunity to prove your identity as a player and more importantly as a team. So, you can, from the start, we not only do you have to start, but you've got to obviously finish. Hello, Oregon, right? So you got to start fast and you got to finish. It really tells how mature your team is. If they can handle an opponent that's coming in from an FCS level and has struggled at the level in the Big Sky, and you can handle them at home in your place and make sure you get through it and on to week 3. So, we still had 18 guys made their debut. 18 players played their first game at Washington State, their debut last week, outside of Gabrud and McIntosh. So, all these guys have, they've got their hats under their belt, right? They got some experience, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if Coach Leach rewards the senior guys on the roster, the veterans, the quarterbacks. All these guys are going to get some snaps, but it's not about getting snaps. It will be about getting the seniors and the veterans on the field, right? It's going to be interesting to see how long Gordon's going to play. It's going to be interesting to see how long Gordon will go, and as long as he performs well, really, we want to see Gordon and Gabrud get as many snaps as possible. And it's interesting about Tinsley coming in after Gage last week. If Gage is going to, be somebody that impacts the season, and we don't hope so, but it is a possibility. I don't want to see him get as many reps and bullets as possible. I want to see him get as many reps and bullets as possible, right? I just didn't understand the third, with Tinsley coming in. I mean, I get it. Tinsley has been with us for so long, but we got to get Gage on the field because it does happen, right? It does happen. So didn't understand that quite, although it is, these guys are so excited. Some of these backups are so excited to get on the field and get some playing time, even if it's about 3 or 4 minutes. So I love how everybody gets a trophy, but this is not trophy time. This is about getting ready for conference play. Let's prepare so we can have get a certain amount of reps. So that's what I'd like to see on Saturday. Hey, number 1, go out and get your job done. Number 2, come in and start and prove that you have an arguable chance to get the rotation, to get in the rotation and get in the lineup, right? These are not going to be difficult opponents. This is our time to shine. One thing that jumps out, look what happened. Stanford and USC are both without their starting quarterbacks now. Right. In fact, young Ryan Helinski is going to start in South Carolina this weekend, right? Because the starting quarterback is hurt, right? So I can see it well. I think that when you get into the fourth quarter, Gabrud comes in. Last week Gabrud was 9 out of 11, and I think we saw some things. First, right out of the gate, you get a bad snap that goes past him, right? So now you're what, 2nd and 25, right? And he stands in the pocket, or he stands, on the very next play, hangs in there, hangs in, doesn't scramble, doesn't leave the pocket, and he completes a great throw to Cassidy Woods to get 3rd and short, right? So I thought that was great, didn't even phase him at all in that bad snap. I mean, it was just great. That shows you an experienced guy. So you also see some of his escape ability on that touchdown throw. So it's what we expect about Gage, right? Seeing him, what he did at Eastern. And if it put him in the game, he's going to give you an opportunity to score and win a football game. So I like that, what we saw. At the end of the day, big win, easy win, take care of business on Saturday, and hopefully things will keep rolling. So, of course, a week from now, we're talking about Houston, a Houston team that was interesting against Oklahoma on Sunday, right? Houston's quarterback will be, he put up some points, and they did a good job. Now, Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma, what an outstanding quarterback. He's ranked number 1 in the country. Man, that Houston game looked interesting. Their struggle is not going to be putting up points. It's going to be stopping our offense. So right now, it looks like it's going to be a shootout right now. Houston stopping the Cougs are going to be difficult. The Cougs, and I'm already talking about a game that's a week from now. But, at the same time, Houston's offense is going to be interesting. Possibly another 4.5-hour game Friday night in a couple of weeks. And hey, what about Oregon, right? The first, we've got, I don't know what it is, 50-50, some Coug fans, they want to see the Ducks go down every time. It is Oregon. We've beaten them 4 years in a row. Oregon's got a Washington State problem. But there are many fans that say, hey, it's Pac-12, right? First time some Washington State fans are going to support, it's Pac-12. And what about finishing? Right? Oregon's got players on computer, just like USC does. There's so many 5-star guys on computer. It's amazing. I think it's their coaching staff, right? So, Pac-12, we're not sitting very good as a conference, showing from, Oregon losing to Auburn and Arizona losing to Hawaii, in Honolulu. So, the reputation about the Pac-12, there's a lot. There's articles in the Seattle Times that are just ripping the Pac-12 from a national perspective. The Pac-12 as a whole does not look strong, especially if you go back the past 5 years history. I don't care, guys. I don't care. Somebody says, well, Podcast Coug, why are you talking about it if you don't care? Well, the media is talking about it. The media is making a big deal that the Pac-12 is not as strong as the other conferences, especially the SEC. If you go back at a 5-year history, if you look at the games, we've been losing. It's pretty bad. But you know what? Who cares? There's a season, and this just will pass, right? As I always say, presidents come and go, politicians come and go, retail stores come and go, and football comes and go. In other words, there'll be a day that we're going to be the strongest in the country, right? So, it might be just the last 5 years. It might just be a season. So, but we aren't making those critical games. We're not really looking good. So let's see how things play out. This is going to be a fun weekend. Gosh, we're wrapping up here episode 2 of our 4th season at the Podcast Coug. And if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe. There's some great benefits of subscribing. You're just going to get automatically updates on your phone, your desktop, and we're all over. We're on every single platform, iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, right? So anywhere you are, Twitter, just hit the subscribe button, and that's going to send some automatic episodes to you. Pretty slick, right? Hit the subscribe button if you like what you hear. The Cougar Prowl tomorrow, the game Saturday at 2 o'clock at Martin. Cougar Prowl is always 2.5 hours from the kickoff. So 11:30 tomorrow at the Field House. What is that Cougar Prowl? You guys know what it is. The team is going to arrive in the buses right outside the Field House, and Leach and the whole team shows up. They do the walkthrough. The band is there. The cheerleaders. Butch is there. Great family time to hang out and to have all that excitement with especially the band and Butch and Leach walking by. It's just great. All the coaches, great stuff. So that is at 11:30 at the Field House. My daughter, who's a teenager in high school, she's going to be touring the Tridelt House tomorrow. She's got a friend in there, and so she's on tour tomorrow a little bit at the Tridelt House. That's kind of cool. Yeah. So we're going to have a great weekend, and we're going to talk to you next week right here at the Podcast Coug. Have a great Saturday, and go Cougs.
You've been listening to the Podcast Coug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the Podcast Coug Radio Network. Find us at PodcastCoug.com.